Just right on time tonight. Make sure my phone's off. Hello. How are you guys doing? Sorry if you can hear the printer. Hey, Melody. My husband apparently decided to print stuff literally right as I started this. So I'm sorry if you can hear the printer. Hopefully it's almost done. I'm not sure how many pages he's printing, so we'll just have to hear that in the background. Hey, Della. Hey, Lorelai. Hey, Kara. Hey, Star Lily. How is everybody doing? Hey, Luna. I think it might be done. It's just bad timing on his part. I told him I was going to be going live at 7, but he's probably not paying attention to that. Hey, Jen. All right. So I'm good. I will forewarn you guys, I have apparently started to, something with the weather changing here has caused me to be a little bit congested and a little bit sneezy. So if I sneeze or you hear me sniffling, I don't have COVID. I've been tested for COVID due to my job. I don't have COVID. It's allergies. I feel fine. I'm just a little bit runny and sneezy for some reason. So, hey, Crystal, how are you doing? You have allergies too? I don't usually really get allergies that often, but I am in a different environment than what I'm used to being in, so I don't know if it's something here maybe. Jen said, before we get into topics tonight, have you watching Little Red's channel? Yes, I have been. I know what's going on. I know what they're talking about over there. I do not, if you guys are interested in that and knowing what's been going on with them, I don't mind if you guys go to her channel and watch them and be able to ask the questions, because right now is when they are, I think this is the last time they're talking about this whole situation, and then they're not going to address it again. So if you have any questions about what's been going on with them, I would advise going to her live. You guys know my lives always come back, and we'll probably be here for an hour, hour and a half, maybe even 2 hours tonight, just depending on how the conversation goes. So I do know what's going on, Jen. Thank you, Della. You're always so sweet to try and keep engagement up. You've developed allergies too. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. It started did it start yesterday? It might have started yesterday. So tonight's topic comes with a massive trigger warning for anyone who struggles with hearing people or myself discuss statistics or just experiences or knowing of experiences related to any kind of self-harm, self-inflicted injuries. I'm sure at some point we'll end up talking about suicide. If these are topics that you are not comfortable talking about or listening about or reading about, I would highly suggest that you not engage in this live. I totally understand. This one is a more serious one, a lot heavier of a topic than what we've discussed in the past. And I don't want anyone to be triggered or have a reaction to this live. So if you fall within that category, I totally understand you not being here. And I would hope you wouldn't be here for your own safety. During the live, I was not able to put in the description the links, but I have a lot of actual articles and statistics and stuff to talk about tonight if people are not willing to kind of provide their experiences. So this is educational, if nothing else. So I do have that, and I will be putting those links in after the live is up. As always, if you are ever struggling with any kind of suicidal ideation or you have concerns for somebody who is, there is the hotline that you can call. You can easily Google it. It will also be linked down below with a specific website with multiple resources for any kind of crisis intervention that anyone may be experiencing, whether that's yourself or if you want to provide that information, phone numbers, links, etc., to somebody you know. That will be readily available for you guys, and I will be sure it is clearly marked. Hey, Amber. Oh, you guys like my eyeliner? Yeah, I didn't do any eyeshadow today. I just did eyeliner, and you can't really tell, but I do have some falsies on. To be honest, they'll probably come off because they're irritating me, but we'll see how long I can leave them on for. I'm going to quickly let my husband know his stuff printed in case he needs it, so I don't get distracted if he comes in later. Hey, Jazzy J. We'll see if he if he gets that. Usually, this household, we kind of typically just yell at each other. I don't typically text him if he's just in a few rooms over, but I don't want to yell on live. Oh, thank you, Amber. Melody said, I found Yellow Ribbon Suicide Prevention to be the most available and helpful. Okay, so there is also another resource. Your husband is a disabled vet, and he has told his doctor he's contemplating killing himself. So Star Lily, I believe you're newer to my channel, and I'm not meaning that in a negative way, but you may not know my husband is active duty military. So I guess just to get on into it and just cut the stuff. Hey, Tor, my experience with like serious self-harm and even some minor self-harm, I personally have never experienced. That is why I have printed off so much material for this topic. Although I have been educated due to my degree about this stuff, I can't provide my own experiences due to me not suffering with anything like this. And I am okay with leading this. And if anybody wants to talk about their story, please, everybody, be extremely respectful and, treasure the fact that somebody's willing to talk about something so vulnerable on the internet. So keep that in mind. The experience I do have is primarily through my husband and his work. He is active duty military. We have been married for almost 9 years, and I think it's about one friend, like one very close friend a year, has committed suicide for him. These are people I know and I have met and I have interacted with, but my relationship with them is different than my husband's relationship with them, obviously. So I have been affected to some degree, and I have worked with individuals who are actively in the thoughts. And, at times there have been people I have been working with who have plans in place, and I will be discussing professionally what is used for my current work, which I'm not going to tell you what it is, but you guys know I work with the community. It is a very well-known tool for people who are actively having ideation and how you handle that. We'll talk about that tonight. So just be aware, like my actual experience is very limited. I have plenty of material. I have, professional kind of knowledge, but not really. But as far as like actual it affecting me, I'm going to be totally transparent with you guys and say I have not ever experienced that. So that is just to break the ice. Make sure Hazels. Yeah, I totally understand that. If this is a trigger topic for anybody, definitely sit out. I do not expect anybody who this is going to impact or potentially put you at risk of anything. Please do not at all try to engage in this. It's not good for you, and it's not good for your loved ones. If someone is engaged in the topic tonight and you find afterwards that you are struggling, please DM me. I am going to make sure that I am around my phone the rest of the evening. That way, in case I get any DMs, I can provide you the correct resources that you need for your area. Okay. So this is a heavy one, and it's a hard one to talk about because it's hard for people to open up in any kind of scenario and provide any kind of, vulnerable information about themselves, especially stuff like this. So what I will say is a lot of people, when you hear self-inflicted injury, self-harm, things of that nature, most of the time, people are going to automatically jump to the physical kind, the kind that you see on arms and on legs, even other parts of their body. That's not the only kind of self-harm. And what people need to be educated on is not all self-harm is with the intent of ending their life. I hope everybody who's in the chat knows that. And if not, you now know that. Just because you come across somebody and you may see scars or you may see like healing wounds, don't necessarily just jump to the conclusion that that person is no longer wanting to be a part of this world, because that is not always the reason that that kind of thing is done. Well, thank you for his service, Amber. Yeah, my husband has experienced things similar to that. He's been deployed 3 or 4 times. I know 3 for sure, maybe 4, since we've been together. So deployment is hard on military, and that can be a whole open discussion on its own for military. I would try to see if that's something you guys are interested in the future, to maybe see if my husband will maybe talk on it. I don't think he wants to be on camera for obvious reasons, and that's fine. Maybe he will talk from behind the camera and answer people's questions and things like that. If that's something you guys are interested in, I don't mind doing that. I'm pretty sure one of Comic Nut's friends, I can't remember his name, he talks a lot about military stuff and his military career, I believe. I can't remember his YouTube name. If I can remember it, I will link his channel down below, because I did subscribe to him, and I can't remember his name. Yes, it can be. Dark Lily says cutting is a stress release much of the time. It can be. It can also be a control, just having control over something. Oftentimes what I have seen in my professional experience in previous work is I worked primarily with families and children, and children would, if they were being abused or neglected, one of their outlets, once they were of age to know what self-harm was inflicting some kind of self-harm, and it was an outlet for them. It rarely was for the ultimate reason people think. Of course, I did come across kids who unfortunately did have ideation, and in 1 or 2 instances over a long period of work, there were children who actually were able to clearly tell me their plan. And that is extremely scary. No matter what kind of position you're in, to hear a child of any age disclose to you they don't want to be here anymore and tell you what their plan is, it is extremely hard to be able to listen to that as a professional and make sure that you are ensuring that this child is cared for appropriately. Oftentimes they end up being in a hold. It's called different things in different states. Typically it's called a 5150. In other places like Florida, where I'm from, it's called a Baker Act, where they are involuntarily held and evaluated, and the timeframes for the evaluation and the hold are going to vary, again, based off of the hospital and the states that they're in. Exactly. Zale said he used to do it for control. That's a very, especially in younger, and not even children, even young adults. That's a very common reason for people to self-harm if they're just self-harming to self-harm and not self-harming for the end of their life. Yes, PTSD is prevalent, very strongly prevalent in any service of the military. It's I think it's now starting to be more talked about and, not so negative for the service members to be aware that this is something that they are going to. It's no longer if this happens, it's more of the conversation now from what I hear from my husband when this happens. Here's what we have in place. Because the military's as a whole typically has things in place to assist their service members and service members' families. It ends up being more often than not a pride issue or a lack of knowledge of the resources. It seems that now, as some of these things become more and more of an issue, like statistical issue where data is being collected and it's known that these things are occurring. My husband, I think, participates in almost a monthly suicide prevention meeting that his squadron holds. Yeah, Zales, it's hard when you have a lot of different contributing factors and are struggling with stuff. The hard thing with PTSD is like actually working through it because it can often become harder initially before it gets better. It's just a relief for you. And I've known it to be a relief for other people too. Exactly, Jazzy J. You do need to have a good connection with your therapist, not even just for PTSD, but with any kind of severe or significant mental health, which can affect your daily functioning. If you don't have a solid relationship with your therapist, you're not going to be getting everything you need out of therapy. It is very common, and I always encourage my anybody I'm working with to not feel bad if they don't get along with a therapist. I don't encourage like doctor shopping, but I encourage making sure you do your research on your therapist before you go to them or before you set that appointment, because if you see that they are specialized in something that you may have or you think you may have, it might be an interest of yours. Or if you know you have a diagnosis and there's a couple of different doctors looking at their reviews, maybe women give them better reviews than men, maybe vice versa. In whichever gender you're falling under, you may want to sway to one versus the based off of the reviews than the other, if that makes sense. I'm glad you have seemed to found some kind of different coping mechanism though. Therapy does typically help. It's all about finding the right therapist for you most often. Hey, Emily. Yeah, for sure. I can see that. The war that's been ongoing now, it's just taken a toll on all branches of the military and all aspects of the military, I feel like. Jen says she wishes the stigma would be removed so more people would get help. Absolutely. And like a lot, I don't want to say a lot because like I said, my education on this, although I'm educated in knowing what to do when somebody is in this state, is where my education comes into play, and kind of ways to work with clients or patients who are in this thought process, or learn about the difference of self-harm, self-inflicted injuries, and suicide. So I know the difference in those as far as like my education, but when it comes to like statistical data, I am not a researcher. I'm not a clinician in any way, shape, or form. I only hold a bachelor's. I can't do any kind of diagnosis or anything like that. So I don't know if what I was going to say would really be appropriate, I guess, is what I'm trying to work through out loud with you guys. Because I think it's kind of common knowledge that a lot of the stigma isn't only just because of society. I think some areas and communities struggle more with it due to the community they're coming from. Like some faiths hold it over worse, so to speak. I don't really know how to articulate what I'm trying to say. I hope it made sense to some degree. So Jazzy J's talking about all of her tattoos. And she got a dog, which helped rescue her a little bit. That's awesome. Emily said she's been in therapy for almost 7 years and recently been diagnosed with something she thought she had a long time ago. So my question, if you're comfortable with answering it, is, did you get a new therapist recently? Sales just finished a tattoo. I appreciate that. I will let him know. You're working on your chest right now. Hey, it's just chat. Definitely, it is hard at first. And I think a lot of what makes it hard at first is building that initial relationship. Because as adults, when you're going into therapy, you have a stigma or a stereotype of what therapy is. You don't have to tell your therapist everything. You tell your therapist what you feel is best for you. If there are certain aspects of your life that you're not comfortable unfolding at that time, don't pressure yourself. A good therapist is not going to pressure you to talk about your traumas. It is going to naturally flow as part of the conversation. I'm not trying to brag on myself. I'm not a therapist by any means, but work that I do and have done, unfortunately, I do have to get this information from people. And I have a very good way of people coming to me and like having that solid ground for people to feel comfortable with disclosing to me their traumas. I've been the first person so many times that people have disclosed trauma to, and it's all about how you approach the people. You have to come at everybody, and this is for life in general. Don't ever come at somebody in any sort of way. Meet them with the same respect you want to be met. When I see homeless people on the street, I don't treat them any differently than if they were my friend. If they approach me, I am respectable. If they ask me for money, if I have it and I think it's appropriate situation, I'll give them what I can. More often than not, I prefer to provide them with food, just due to probably some bias in me and some jadedness of, some homeless have ruined that for me. From where I'm from, there was a particular homeless gentleman who was a panhandler, and he was known to just buy beer and drugs, and subsequently he was providing it to minors. So due to knowing that, growing up in a small town, it has kind of jaded me to an extent with homelessness around me. Is I will be respectful to them, I will help them, but I'm not going to just give them money unless I absolutely have to. If that's all I have and they are coming to me and not just standing there, if they actually approach me, I typically will do what I can. Melody says there's so many different styles of therapy. Some are more cognitive, some are more focused on behaviors, emotions, some are more creative. And she discloses that she sees a musical therapist. Absolutely. And finding what is going to be best for you, what kind of therapy is going to be best for you, will also help. As a nurse, you worked for 3 years at Brady Psychiatric Hospital in Colorado, and you primarily worked with children ages 6 to 15. I'm sure that was a very hard job for you to do. Anything dealing with children to any degree. Children and the elderly for me are, because they're innocent to degrees, I cannot take, it's really hard for me to excuse poor behavior or actions towards that demographic of our society. Yeah, community does play a huge part in mental health. Melody says something interesting. She said she has went through a lot, and I remember my first time therapy was suggested, I freaked out. And not only that, I saw other classmates there, and there was like this look we gave each other, not to tell anyone at school, which looking back now is so heartbreaking. It should have made me realize I wasn't alone, yet we are all scared other students would find out. And that plays into that stigma 100%. I think it translates into adulthood, maybe not so much in the arena of going to therapy. Is it likely you're going to see somebody in the waiting room? Not really. Can it happen? Yeah, it can, but it's not as common as when you're going to therapy in school and the therapist comes to your school, you're doing group sessions, and it's scheduled for you. It's hard. You're being vulnerable. It's embarrassing. You don't know if, the person 2 seats next to you, if they really don't like you. And they, especially in high school, this is like clique mentality, when you think that they don't like you and then you're afraid they're going to go out and tell your class what happened. If similar stuff has happened to me, not in related to like self-harm or anything, but I was in foster care growing up, and everybody always asked where my parents were. Why was I orphaned? I was made fun of and bullied because I was a ward of the state. And that was not obviously my doing. I had nothing to do with that. That was my parents' poor choices put me in that situation. But kids don't understand that. And I don't fault them for that, but it made it harder for me to trust people, which we all know spills out into every asset of your life. Yes, Jazzy J. I'm not a weird creator as far as ever promoting other YouTubes, other Instagram, other social media, or other outlets, as long as it's going to be beneficial, especially in these open discussions. I want it to be beneficial to our topic or providing additional information for people in a positive way. Since it's live, I can't fact check, so please keep that in mind. But I typically trust my subscribers and people who are in the chat that they're not going to do something that'll seem weird. Your mom put you on Prozac. That's a super intense drug for you to be taking that young. I don't mind talking about stuff like this. I think it's important. And I know there's channels who, like, you can just YouTube it. Like, there's so many channels that have, like, actual therapists, actual mental health counselors, people who are further educated in topics like this. And I'm sure their content is good. I've seen a few of them. One guy that gets talked about a lot is Dr. Grande. And I think somebody recently said his degree was something not expected. I don't mind his content. I like content like that, but to a degree, because I don't think it's necessarily breaking any stereotypes or removing the stigma, because you're talking about influencers. You're not really talking with your subscriber base and allowing them to provide their feedback and their experiences and ask questions to the chat. I think it's more educational that way personally, and that's why I've started doing these, and these will always happen. Okay, that makes a little bit more sense if it was a little bit, if it wasn't in recent times. Yeah, children and elderly, I think, hold a very strong spot in most people's hearts and in their minds. They're just a vulnerable population. Exercise helps some people. Hey, Sammy Joe, how are you doing? Yeah, it seems to help a couple of people in the chat. Having any kind of coping mechanism in general is going to help with any kind of mental health, whether it's the topic of tonight or other forms of mental health like anxiety and depression. Coming up with a good set of coping skills that work for you are going to be the best to help you manage it. That's awesome, Amber. I've thought about putting together packs, but I never have. I'm honestly way too forgetful. Even if I were to leave them in my vehicle, I would forget they were there. I know myself to know I would forget, and then I'd have all these packs, which I guess in turn I could always just donate to the community. Hey, Mila. The topic is self-harm in any aspect, whether that's, yeah, Crystal kind of clarified. It can be self-harm in the way of not being a concern of like ending your life, self-harm, whether it's a control or a release. We have talked about the more serious forms of self-harm being suicide or attempted suicides. Your mom completed 2 years ago. I am very sorry for your loss. I've talked about Sammy Joe since you're just entering, and it seems a couple of people are just now entering. I have not personally struggled with any kind of self-harm. It's not something I don't know how I managed to not, due to some of the traumas and things that I have experienced. It's just someplace that I personally never, I don't think I knew about it. Not saying that that's what causes some people to actually partake in that action. It's nothing, it's something I never knew was a thing or knew existed. It didn't ever come to my mind to do something like that. I'm more of a baby when it comes to hurting myself, so I don't know if I would have ever been able to cope in that manner. So I don't have experience. The only experience I have, especially with completed stuff, is my husband's active duty military. So he has had very close friends, some of which that I had relationships with, like friendships, and seeing who have completed. Over the years, it's averaged about one a year, and we've been married for 9 years. So I see more of the effects it has on the military community and my husband. And of course, a little bit of that overspills as a spouse, but, and knowing these people. But as far as like somebody really, really like enclosed to me, like family or like a very personal friend, I have not experienced that. Ooh. Yeah, I talk about it in my foster care series. I can only vividly remember being somewhat abused by a foster parent in one home. And I don't think I actually went into very much detail about that. But I did experience that. And I don't remember how old I was. A lot of my story is me saying I don't remember exactly. This was the time frame. This was what I do remember. And unfortunately, that's just how my memory has developed due to the trauma I have experienced. Melody, I'm sorry for your loss as well. I think I'm super behind in the chat. Amber, was it intentional or was it an accidental, due to that information that I see now? I'm just curious. If you don't want to answer, you don't have to. Absolutely, Sammy. And you bring a different topic that we haven't really talked about, is the effects that completion of suicide has on the people you leave behind. It is so traumatic for people you leave behind. And if I can remember, when I'm providing all the links, if we use any of this hard material around me, like these things, if we talk about those and I link the sources, I will try to link the channel. And it's just not a night for me to remember people's channels. There's a family channel. Was it Cam and Fam or Fam and Cam? Who was a young couple, and her husband recently, they have a large platform and a large following. Her husband had recently completed, and she goes through her experience and what led up to that, and how she handled it in the coming days. If it's something that you can muster watching, because it is very emotional, I highly suggest you watch it. Although she is young, she is very well articulate in how she talks about the story and talks through the pain and everything. For somebody who hasn't experienced that experience, it was eye-opening for me. And this is coming from somebody who is educated on how to handle things like this. It's still totally different and a different feeling and experience when you're seeing somebody tell you and walk you through every little bit of it. I'm sorry you experienced that, Jazzy. I don't blame you for having that reaction too. Hey, Delaney. Okay, she discloses that she was a cutter in her early teens and in her teens and early 20s. It's not, although it's talked about as if it's taboo, it's really more common than people think. Not that I'm saying everyone who struggles with this has visible marks. You know, there's different ways to self-harm. There's the obvious, which most people think of, which is like bleeding and things like of that nature. But people will do almost anything just to cause, like pinching themselves or hitting themselves. That's all, those are still forms of self-inflicted injuries. You can really hurt yourself in a multitude of ways. Yeah, Amber, I have been told by children. I don't think the youngest one was that young, but I have been told by children that they had a plan before in previous work. Zale says, when I hear about how bad other people had it, I get mad at myself for complaining about my own problems. I'm not picking on you. Don't take this as me picking on you. But that's kind of what happens, because then when people are willing to be vulnerable and we're willing to put our stories out there for other people to judge, to digest, to pick apart, to criticize, it's going to happen. If you're allowing yourself and you're not in a community you trust, those things can easily happen. When people are disclosing their stories, whether it's just to you or to a group of people, they are telling their stories. At least for me, I'll speak from my own experience. I'm telling my story and have told my story and have been vulnerable with you guys, not to garner sympathy, not for people to feel like, oh, woe is me, I had it worse than you. It's more for an educational thing, a release thing. Let's build each other up. Let's support each other, because ultimately that's what's needed. Not so much of you comparing. And I'm not trying to pick on Zales and say that that's what he's doing, but this is something that is commonplace. We all face traumas. We all go through hardships, whether it's when you're young, when you're a teenager, when you're an adult. Life is hard. Everyone has a hard life at some point. Even rich people have hard lives. Even poor people have hard lives. It's not, you don't face trauma based on your socioeconomic status. There are parts of who we are as people that can predispose us to more traumas than other people. We just, as a community, as a society, as humans, need to be willing to put our own shit, so to speak, aside and be active listeners and allow people to tell their stories and to not judge them and to not criticize it and to not try to pick it apart, but just allow that person to tell you what they are willing to tell you. Because if somebody is going to sit there and unveil whatever it is that they're feeling comfortable enough with you to tell you, that's sacred. It really is. And people take advantage of that and people abuse that. Even on social media, I see some creators who are in this work who kind of do this for the wrong reason. And I'm not trying to bring up an old drama by any means, but I know the Rewired Soul got into a bunch of garbage because of what he was putting out as content. That is damaging because he was just projecting and making assumptions and coming to whatever diagnosis for people on social media that he thought was appropriate. That's judgment. That's picking apart somebody's person, their personality, who they're deciding to depict online. We need to start putting our own selves in check for things like that. And I have gotten really far behind in the chat because I just decided to hop on a soapbox. I apologize. You went to France in 2005. Those churches were fantastic. I was actually born in France. I didn't grow up there. I was just born there. I want to go back just because I was born there. Exactly, Jazzy J. Crystal, I went into foster care when I was an infant and I was not adopted until I was 10 years old. So I was in state care for 10 years of my life. I have, I don't know if you've been here when I've talked about it. I have a whole playlist going through my whole experience through foster care and then adoption. Mila says, I have a friend whose husband ended his life while I was talking to her in Skype. She left her mic on to go to the bathroom and found him. The scream haunts your dreams. I can only imagine. Hey, Ashley says she lost her cousin to suicide in 2011 and his father, my uncle, who was like a dad the same way. You are now active duty working in psych, which is the field I want to continue in. I commend you so much because you have gone through severe grief and loss, and you have used that to motivate you to try and help the community. That is very similar to what my history and what I experienced is what propelled me into wanting to get a social work degree and work in the fields I have been and continue to work in. While it's improving, the military's mental health services are severely lacking, which is so unfortunate. They do lack. I'm not going to try and sugarcoat that. It is something that the military could do better in. Ashley, if you're comfortable, if you want to reach out to me on either Twitter or Instagram, you don't have to tell me exactly where you're at, but what your state you're in. I can maybe find you some resources that will help you with any kind of military affiliation. If you're comfortable, that offer is there for you. Hey, Pat. I am so far behind. I'm going to quickly probably scan through some of these. Lady Law says, as a social worker, please don't disclose serious trauma unless you've coped. It's dangerous and can re-traumatize. No, I think I understand what you're saying. I have coped with all of my trauma, to be quite honest. I've had a long time to work through it. And that's something I have disclosed at the very beginning of this, that if this was a hard topic for anybody, I encourage them to not participate in today's live. Melody says, even though I have severe depression and anxiety, I was/am the one in the friend group people come to. I don't usually go to other people as I feel like I would be a burden and they are going through. I'm not sure if it cut off or if that's where you wanted to end your thought. With that, Melody, I would just advise that if you are in a bad place, there is nothing wrong with you telling your friend that now's not a good time for you to be the person for them to come to, and maybe know of some phone numbers or some websites that you can direct them to. That way they still have an outlet. But we always, unfortunately, and this is going to sound crappy, but when it comes to mental health, you do need to put yourself first. You kind of have to be selfish in that way, because if you're not healthy, then you really aren't going to be providing the best advice or, the best active listener if you are struggling yourself. So just always keep that in mind. Hey, Austin. Melody said she's had 2 friends who have stopped mid-attempt, and it was one of the hardest things she had ever had to go through. She's forever grateful that she took what they were saying as serious. Absolutely. Anytime you get if you are not trained or you do not know how to ask further questions to gauge where somebody is at in their ideation, you 100% need to call either a mobile crisis number if you have that in your area, or you need to call law enforcement. Law enforcement obviously is going to be the alternative. A lot of people don't like authority. They don't want to be questioned by law enforcement. But they are trained and they have the ability, at least here in the US, to put people under 5150s or Baker Acts or whatever they're called in your state. So I would advise most, if you can, to get a mobile crisis unit, mental health crisis unit out to the people, or bring them to a hospital, or get them somebody who is within range to get them to a hospital so that they can be evaluated. Yeah, I guess I have, some of you guys maybe don't know about my experience. That's definitely understandable, Sammy Joe, for you to have that experience. And especially if you're struggling or you deal with somebody completing when you are a child, it's going to have lasting effects, especially if you haven't been provided the resources or you don't know to look for the resources. I appreciate that, Amber. Your sister. Hey, Michelle. Are you kidding me? Michelle said, my sister tried to kill herself with sleeping pills at the ER. One of the nurses told her if she was serious about suicide, she should have used a gun. I hope that was not in recent time. I hope that we have broken down the stigma enough in churches, not churches, in hospitals to educate and inform. That's doesn't mean the same thing. There's multiple methods, and it's even been statistically proven on which genders kind of tend to go what way. And that's in some of this documentation. If you guys want me to look at it, that's sitting around me, I can dig it out. Thank you, Austin. It didn't pop up at the top. I'm sorry for getting to you late. I really appreciate that. I don't ever encourage people to send super chats. I do this just for fun. I appreciate it, obviously. It's a very kind gesture, but don't ever feel like you need to or you have to. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all of the people who have been one of the ones left behind because somebody has completed. We as humans, and maybe this is just me speaking biasly since I haven't experienced what several of you are disclosing, is losing somebody due to this, but I have lost people due to natural causes or to things outside of their control, typically health related. So I understand what grief is, but I don't think typically for me, the grief I have experienced with humans has been somewhat expected. I haven't had to deal with the grief and the trauma of grief coming unexpectedly from the loss of somebody I love and I care about. I can empathize and sympathize with you as much as I humanly can think of what that would feel like. Ultimately, I do not know. If you ever find yourself struggling with dealing with any kind of grief or crisis, whether that's a mental health crisis or something different, we live in an age where everything is at our fingertips. Sometimes that's a good thing and sometimes it's a bad thing. But when you're struggling or you're having a hard time, I really would encourage you to Google whatever you're struggling with and call whatever number pops up. There's always 24/7 hotlines for any and all kind of crisis you could possibly be going through. And if they can't help you and you tell them that they're not helping you, they should have the resources at their fingertips to provide you further resources. I 100% agree with what Lady Law is saying. She says she's supportive of people sharing such things. She just thinks that it can be a privacy or a safety risk if they're not ready to have people pick it apart. People will exactly do what I think you're saying will do what I'm saying. Unfortunately, it will happen. And that's why I always encourage people to not disclose if they're not comfortable and to make sure that they are in a place where they can. I understand 100% where you're coming from. I try to always make that a part of these discussions at the beginning because I understand the repercussions it can have. Personally, I'm fine with being vulnerable on here and providing my own story. I have coped with everything that I could have to offer in a negative way, things that I am not ready to talk about or to openly discuss for whatever reason. I typically don't, or I say I'm not ready to discuss it just because I know the repercussions that I can have by maybe providing misinformation or not disclosing everything as it should be because I'm not ready to talk about it. Hey, Smiley Mama, glad you made it. Man, I just lost myself in the chat. I'm sorry if I skipped anybody's comment. If I did and you wanted me to read it, just unfortunately, please re-comment it. I'm sorry. Yeah, Sammy Joe. I understand where you're coming from. And I think most people here know I'm not going to be mentioning that for particular reasons that I'm sure everybody's aware of. But I understand where your frustration in that lies. You worked in adult psych for years and it really broke your heart in your bank. Yeah, anybody who's really working in any kind of mental health field, I have the most respect for, to any degree. Like, even if you're not the clinical therapist working with somebody, if you're not, some people who aren't the clinical therapists that are the ones at the front of the field are the ones who see the most and the worst. And it can be so hard and damaging, especially when workplaces are not providing resources or educating their staff on how to self-care and how to, be able to kind of stop work when work stops. I have not really struggled with that. I've always kind of been able to detach myself from work. So I know that's something I haven't personally struggled with, but I know coworkers throughout all of my professional experience who haven't been able to do that. And it is very, very hard on them. And if it was something that our workplaces was putting in effort to educate and to ensure that staff is taking what is necessary to be healthy for themselves, the work product would be even 20 times better than what it already was. Yeah, Jen just is saying that picking on anybody in this chat will get you shut down. Yeah, typically I'm better at keeping up with the chat than I have been tonight, and I will not condone that either in my live chat or on my videos in the comment sections. If I see any kind of bullying or harassing or even something that's could be misunderstood by a reader, I will hide it or I will block it. I really haven't had to do that much, but I'm not afraid to do that if I have to. My subscribers and my viewers are important to me, especially when we have these conversations, because I know how vulnerable and how sensitive some of the stuff is that people talk about. And if someone is going to be foolish enough to try and pick on somebody over that, they're gone, and I will call them out for it because it's totally inappropriate. You have in your state check, social worker is harsh. Like the state funded social worker isn't doing what they're supposed to or isn't providing the care that you need. I don't want to assume what you mean by that comment. Yeah, absolutely. That nurse should have never made a comment like that. I'm glad he told the doctor, Michelle, because that should be corrected. Even if it wasn't in a time more recent when there is education and things being put in place, I'm pretty sure for nurses to know how to handle situations like that. That's still something you wouldn't say even before education around this topic was known. I might have to sneeze. I'm sorry. No, Lady Law, I totally understand where you're coming from. And that's why I tried to clarify for people who are coming in that I do go through those disclosures and I always leave these lives up. So when people are watching in replay, they get that disclosure at the beginning before they continue and they know what topic we're talking about. But it's kind of hard to keep track of when people are coming in and leaving and who's coming in and leaving because there's no way to know unless you comment. But I appreciate you saying that because if anything, it reminds me that I need to restate those trigger warnings and disclosures. Oh, did I? Hey, Melly Lynn, how are you? Have a good night, Michelle. Thank you for popping in while you could. Melly Lynn, the topic has been self-inflicted injuries, self-harm, completed suicide, attempted suicide, things of that nature. We have gotten off track here or there, but for the most part, that's kind of where we've been hanging out. Hey, CJ, how are you doing? Did I catch up to? I think I've caught up to the chat, but I maybe missed a comment here or there. If I missed your comment, unfortunately, I'm going to ask that you just re-comment it. Did I? Yeah, Austin has a Twitter. Austin, you'll have to type in your handle because I don't remember what it is. He does have a Twitter if you want to follow him there. That's up to you guys. I don't know if I missed something. Dark Lily's asking if there's a point. Did I miss something? I think I maybe skipped some areas of conversation and I don't know what's going on. The therapy you have to be careful with is retail therapy. I think that's everybody, though. I think every person has the ability to get carried away with overspending or buying things that maybe weren't necessary. The golden nugget I got from my psychiatrist was that it's a scientific fact that I will eventually stop crying. Well, that's interesting. I don't think there's anything wrong with crying. As humans, we all cry. Even, everyone cries at some point, and we're all going to cry over different things. We all react to things differently. Two people can get the same news and react totally differently. Hard subject. My son, 23, tried to commit suicide 3 months ago. Moved back home now and feel lost on helping him. Melly Lynn, if you are comfortable, I would suggest DMing me in Twitter or Instagram. That way, if you're comfortable with providing me the area you're in, I can find specific resources for both you and your son. I definitely don't have any problems doing that. I offer that to anybody who is actively struggling. I can always look up resources for you guys. I typically know where to look to find the resources for whatever it is we're talking about. I'm sorry you are struggling with that right now. Yeah, Jen is saying just listen to him and make sure you're listening to his needs. Absolutely. It seems that she's doing what she can. But since it is such a recent event, I don't want to push you to talk about it. But I would ask that you reach out to me. That way I can help you guys find some resources. I'm not saying you don't have any resources. There's chancing with an attempt. He already does. But as a parent going through that, you also need resources. CJ, the live's about self-inflicted injury, self-harm, and suicide, whether that's completed, attempted. You put him for, I mean, that's, I think most parents would answer that if they're good at parenting, that their children are put first. Definitely reach out to me. My handle on Twitter and Instagram, I believe, is Amanda Pants Does Life on both. So just shoot me a DM. I will, if I don't look for it tonight, I will look for it in the morning. I intend to keep my phone next to me tonight due to the seriousness of this topic, and offering people, if you are struggling, to DM me so I can help you find resources. Yeah, Sammy Joe, I get what your Sammy Joe has disclosed that she's lost her mom due to a completion, and she's left behind, and she doesn't have answers, and she's in the grieving and the coping process. It's hard, and for people who are left behind or who had any kind of relationship with people who do complete, it's hard for us to understand. It's hard for those to be able to get any kind of closure. And it's a real struggle. It's a long-term struggle, unfortunately. Saying don't do it, although it's easy for us to say, when people are actively in suicidal ideation and have plans, saying don't do it does not help at all. In some scenarios, it can actually be the pushing point. I get what you're saying, but that's why if anybody ever discloses to you that they're having active ideation, you need to get professionals involved immediately. And if it's a ruse, which common day, it's not done to get attention. Does it happen every once in a while? Yes, it does, but it's not very common for it to actually be an attention-seeking thing. It is, even if people don't have plans in place, but they are struggling with active ideation, there's typically an underlying mental health issue that needs to be addressed, and they need to be evaluated. Hey, Amber, how are you? Sorry if you guys heard the laptop do that. I don't know why it does that every once in a while. Jen makes a very good point, and I don't know if I said that. I am happy he has you and that you're supporting him, and that you are, although you are struggling, I'm sure he doesn't know you're struggling because you're trying to be that strong, courageous mom for him. That is awesome. I don't want to get upset, but that's really what some people need when they're in situations like that. Definitely understand. I 100% understand. Thank you. Everybody likes my eyeliner tonight. I've got to go walk my dog and go grade more papers. This was a great live. Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm probably only going to be on a little bit longer. If anybody has any specific questions, or if you want me to go over, there's one thing I'm definitely going to go over before I get out. So I'm going to give it a minute or two for people to ask any questions or provide any of their experiences that they want to. Then I'm going to kind of wrap that part up and talk about just provide a little bit of education for you guys, and then we'll call it good for tonight. It's okay you're late. You guys know you don't have to apologize for being late. Spread love, not hate. It's easy to get sucked into negativity. It's always easy to get sucked into negativity. And with social media, it's even easier. And that's something else that we kind of need to, I will kind of address here in a minute. Thanks. It's just chat. I don't think you were here. Once this posts, I will have a link of resources that have multiple numbers and multiple websites to go to for any kind of crisis that you are in. Some are phone numbers, some are websites, and they are broken down to whatever crisis you may be facing. That is for you to use at your discretion. It is also for you to use and save in your phone and maybe provide that to other people who you know may be struggling with any of those crises in your life. No, don't ever apologize. You are only providing a resource to people. That is 100% fine. It is important that you posted that because it has reminded me to reiterate that that is going to be in the comments, in the description box. So one of the things I talk about in closing of this topic is you can find this online, and I am not encouraging people who don't know how to use this to use it. But there are tests that you can find online to help establish where somebody is at when they have suicidal ideation. Hey, Petra, it's called a Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale. This is what I use currently in my work. Previously, the work I did was a little bit different, so it was handled a little bit differently. But currently, this is what I am trained to use and what we use whenever it is brought up in conversation with my clients, and anything is brought up about whether they make a comment, whether it's joking or not, it's taken seriously, and you ask questions. That is the number one thing you have to do. You have to take it seriously. Excuse me. You have to take it seriously. Even if you think they're joking, take it seriously. Ask them a question. If you don't know if they're joking, ask, are you joking? Are you serious? From there, you need to ask further questions. If you don't know how, or you are not educated or feel comfortable asking those questions, get that person to somebody who can, i.e. mobile crisis, or take them to the hospital, or last resort, law enforcement, because all of those people are educated and trained. I am trained on how to ask further questions. I'm not going to provide that here because I do not want to have somebody maybe say they got miseducated by somebody on the internet. But I am educated and know how to ask these questions appropriately and to be able to know. So the one thing that I always want to say, never take it as a joke, no matter what. I know now with social media being on the forefront and how we interact with people, It is causing us as humans to become more lonely because we rely on internet connections. We rely on our friends online. It is so commonplace, especially right now with COVID. It is so commonplace to just live your day on the internet. And it's hard to tell if you don't have any actual human interaction. Please make sure if you are an individual who is more online right now because of COVID, or you just prefer online presence, make sure you have at least one person in, you know, your life outside of the internet that you can talk to, and try to be sure you are engaging with that person on somewhat of a regular basis to keep normalcy to yourself. Because as a society, this is all my conjecture at this point. I think that if we do not start setting ourselves up for basic human interaction after COVID, society is going to go to poop, because everybody's been either a keyboard warrior or they have just been consuming copious amounts of internet, whether that's YouTube, streaming platforms, gaming, whatever it is. I mean, we're all victim to it. I have a social media like whatever this is called, YouTube. I'm a creator. I spend a lot of time online. I have to put in place boundaries, and I still work. I couldn't imagine if I was working from home right now full time, what my life would be like. Because I would have no boundaries. Luckily, me going back, being an essential worker, I have not had the choice to put in boundaries. To a degree, I still have to, because I would come home and do a live every night, which would end, because I love my community. Being able to have conversations like this with you guys is what I built this channel for. The other stuff, the commentary stuff, I would be fine to never engage with that again, because that's not where my passion is. Am I good at it? Do people like it? Yes, that's why I continue it. But my passion is here. My passion is this stuff. My passion is helping people and breaking stigmas and having conversations and having healthy debates. That's what my channel was built for. So I don't want these people who I have learned to care about and I have built good relationships with you guys to have this pandemic. Of course, it's not going to go away. We know that. But as things kind of go down and the world tries to go back to some kind of a norm and we have people interaction again, people aren't going to know how to basically interact with one another if we're not making sure we're putting in place boundaries and checking on those who are real. Because if they were struggling before, they're isolated, they're alone, they don't have anybody to talk to but somebody online. What if that person online lives across the world and they are having a bad moment and that person just so happens to be asleep? These are real world issues that we really need to think about in this community online, and making sure that we are putting in safety nets for ourselves, for our families, for our friends. If you haven't talked to somebody in a while, try to reach out to them. I'm not saying mend a 5-year relationship, like a 5-year friendship, just because of COVID. But I'm saying if you haven't talked to somebody in the past month and you haven't heard from them, be the one who's willing to maybe make it awkward and reach out and say, hey, how are you doing? Sometimes that's all it needs. That's all somebody needs, is just that olive branch. So I would implore everybody within the next couple of days to reach out to somebody that you haven't talked to in a month, whether that's a family member, a friend, whether that's through text messages, FaceTime, whatever it is. Reach out to somebody. If you have people in your life that you can see and visit, some places are lifting restrictions. Bring back some kind of normalcy to your life so you don't end up in a position where you feel isolated and you start to struggle and you feel that there's no way out. I hope everybody takes this conversation well. I know this last bit has been heavy and a lot of my opinions and what I feel, especially currently, but it is important for everybody to be able to step back. So, I have, yes, it's just chat says, check on your people, the elderly neighbor that you haven't seen in a week or so. Definitely. Leaving a letter in their mailbox, especially if they're older and they're elderly and you don't know their immune system, if they are healthy or not, just leave a note in their mailbox. I don't know if this is going to be like me maybe stereotyping, and it could be to a degree, but it is kind of proven that our elderly don't have, especially as they get older in age, they don't have the connection. A lot of them struggle with mental health like depression because they feel lonely. And getting just a little note from somebody anonymous, their neighbor, somebody across the street, even their nurses or their healthcare workers, getting a little note, just checking on them can mean the absolute world to an elderly person. Keep those things in mind. Always try to think of what one good deed could I do today to try and make somebody's day. Just one thing, whether that's providing a homeless man a meal or going to the pound and playing with a puppy outside for 30 minutes, just allowing that dog to get extra exercise. Exactly. Melody says random acts of kindness. Think of things like that. I don't have anything against you, Austin, but I don't encourage drug use on my channel. So you do you, no issues, but I'm not going to let comments like that hang out after that one. I don't care what you do on your channel or on your social medias, but I don't encourage it. So just always try and be doing something better for other people, because think of how you would feel if that one act of kindness on your worst day happened to you. How much would that turn your life around? Austin's not a troll. He's very blunt, and I don't mind that, but I just don't want it to be perceived in such a serious conversation that I'm okay with that when Austin's new here, so I don't think he realizes my stance on certain things. That just got us sidetracked, but that's okay. Always just try and think of ways that you would want people to treat you on your worst day. That's the best way to go about it. For anybody who gets to this point, if you're watching this now or in replay, if you are struggling, please reach out to me in the DMs. Of course, I am probably going to ask some information as far as knowing your location to some degree to be able to find the resources in your area. If you're not comfortable with that, I will provide you just 800 numbers in the websites that I'm going to leave in the description box. I'm fine with doing either, but I would really hate for anybody to be overly triggered by this live and not reach out and not feel comfortable to reach out. I'm not going to judge you. I may ask a few clarifying questions just to make sure I understand the severity of what's going on, to be sure I get you to the appropriate resources for you. It's fine, Zales. I know, I've seen some of his videos and stuff like that. I don't mind, it's just kind of like a thing on this channel. I don't encourage substances. It's a topic we talk about occasionally. If he wants to do that on his channel or on his social medias, that's cool. I'm not going to judge him for that, but I'm not going to allow comments in my comment section encouraging it, because I have openly spoken against drug use. I hope that makes sense. I hope you get what I mean. So guys, I think I covered everything. I had a couple of comments providing some different topics. So next week's poll is probably going to provide very different topics than what has been. We kind of cycle through the same ones with one different one here or there. The next one is probably going to have a couple of very different ones than what I've provided before. That's at request of some of you guys. And whatever one that wins will be the one we talk about. And then at the end of that live, I am going to see what will be next, because I think there were 3 topics that people wanted to discuss. So I want to be able to provide those viewers, because other people were also interested in them, the ability to have a discussion like this. So with all of that being said, I hope you guys all have a good evening. I don't know when my next video will be up or when I will be live again. So just keep an eye on the community tab for me to post for my next live. I will try to make it scheduled. My next video hasn't even been filmed, so that may come out this week. It may come out over the weekend. So I hope you guys don't mind. I'm still working through my new schedule at work. So until I can get that ironed out and get somewhat of a feel and a filming schedule, I don't want to tell you guys like I have in the past, I'm going to do this and then not follow through. Thank you guys. Have a good, yeah, Austin isn't a troll. If he was a troll, I would have kicked him. I know he has good intentions. So that's why he was here. I don't mind him being here. I'm just not going to, I'm repeating myself. So we are going to go ahead and end this. Have a good day, good evening, good night, wherever you are. And I will see you next time. Bye, guys.